Hello there, my sleepy citizens. Tonight, we journey into the shadowed streets of Gotham City, where mysteries lurk and the Dark Knight stands vigilant against the forces of chaos. We bring you tales of Batman, uncovering different sides of the man behind the mask. And as our journey through these stories winds down, a calm ambience of Gotham's streets will carry you throughout the night, bringing you to restful sleep without interruptions from any ads. If you enjoy these tales, please be sure to give us a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what story you'd like to hear next. But for now, let's get cozy and step into the world of Gotham. Rain fell on Gotham in sheets of silver, drumming against gargoyles and washing centuries of grime from Gothic spires. From his perch atop Wayne Tower, Batman watched the city transform beneath the deluge. Water cascaded down his cowl, pooling at his feet before spilling over the edge into the abyss below. Nights like these changed Gotham's character, softening harsh edges while amplifying shadows. The perpetual rain had continued for 7 days, as if the city were trying to cleanse itself of sins too deep to wash away. His communit hummed softly. "Master Bruce," Alfred's voice carried through the storm. "I've been monitoring police channels. There's been an incident in Crimson Alley." Batman's posture stiffened imperceptibly. Crimson Alley, once known by another name before that night 30 years ago. Before the pavement absorbed the blood of Thomas and Martha Wayne. Before a boy's world shattered beneath a broken string of pearls. Details? His response was measured, betraying none of the sudden tension beneath his armor. "Most unusual, sir. No violence reported, but officers described finding messages written in what appears to be mist or condensation on the alley walls. Messages that disappeared when approached." A pause. And a scent of roses lingering in the air. The scent of roses. Batman closed his eyes momentarily behind his cowl. Andrea had always worn a subtle rose perfume, claiming it reminded her of her mother's garden. Andrea Beaumont. The phantasm. A ghost from his past who had disappeared into the night years ago. "I'm on my way." He rose from his crouched position, water cascading from his cape as it unfurled behind him. The city below shimmered through the rain, a mosaic of lights refracted through teardrops. With practiced precision, he launched himself from the ledge, allowing gravity to pull him into the waiting darkness, before extending his cape to catch the wind. Crimson Alley lay in the oldest part of Gotham, where narrow streets remembered the city's birth centuries ago. The rain fell differently here, somehow heavier, more insistent. By the time Batman arrived, the police had erected a perimeter of blue and red lights that reflected in countless puddles, transforming the scene into a kaleidoscope of color. Officer Montoya noticed him first as he emerged from the shadows. "We preserved the scene as best we could," she said without preamble, gesturing toward the brick walls. "But the message keeps fading, then reappearing when we step back. Never seen anything like it." Batman approached slowly, studying the rain-slicked surfaces. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just weathered brick darkened by decades of pollution and tonight's relentless rain. Then, as he paused several feet away, condensation began forming on the wall, droplets arranging themselves with impossible precision. "Remember the fallen," he read aloud, watching as the words glistened briefly before dissolving back into random moisture. "That's not all," Montoya said quietly. "There's something at the exact spot where..." She trailed off, knowing he understood. the exact location where Thomas and Martha Wayne had fallen. Batman moved deeper into the alley, toward the place forever etched in his memory. The rain seemed to part before him, creating a momentary shelter from the downpour. On the ground, a single red rose lay perfectly preserved despite the torrent, its petals unnaturally vibrant against the grey concrete. Beside it, condensation formed again on the pavement. Some debts remain unpaid. We tried to collect it as evidence, Montoya explained, but anyone who touches the rose feels a sudden, overwhelming sadness. Medical checked them out, physically fine but emotionally shaken. Like they'd experienced someone else's grief. Batman crouched beside the rose without touching it, scanning with his cowl's sensors. No unusual compounds detected. No technology or transmitters. He stood, rain once again cascading over his armor. Keep the scene secured. I'll need complete privacy for 5 minutes. Montoya nodded, retreating with the other officers to the perimeter. When Batman was certain he was unobserved, he touched his gauntlet to his cowl, activating a specialized filter. The world shifted to shades of blue and white, revealing heat signatures and energy patterns invisible to the naked eye. The rose glowed with faint thermal energy despite the cold rain, and there, traced in the air like a memory refusing to fade, was a silhouette he would recognize anywhere. The flowing cloak and distinctive mask of the phantasm, somehow captured in disturbed air molecules and lingering body heat. The signature was hours old, but preserved by the unusual atmospheric conditions in the alley. Alfred, he sub-vocalized, cross any reports of fog or mist behaving unusually in Gotham this week, and check if any Gotham elites have reported threats or break-ins. Already compiling that information, sir, came the prompt reply, and I've taken the liberty of reviewing security footage from Wayne Enterprises' downtown cameras. 3 separate incidents of unusual fog patterns were recorded, all moving against prevailing wind conditions. Batman took one last look at the rose before turning away. I need locations and timestamps. And Alfred... He paused, voice softening almost imperceptibly. Pull the file on Andrea Beaumont. Very good, sir. May I suggest you also visit Dr. Thompkins? She's been seeing a patient who claims to have encountered what they described as a crimson ghost near the Cathedral District. Batman acknowledged the suggestion with silence as he fired his grapnel toward a nearby rooftop. The rain enveloped him as he ascended, a liquid curtain separating him from the world below. The city stretched before him, a vast, breathing entity wounded by time and circumstance, much like himself. If Andrea had truly returned to Gotham, her appearance in Crimson Alley was no coincidence. She was sending a message only he would fully comprehend. The rain continued its relentless percussion as Batman made his way across the rooftops toward Leslie Thompkins' clinic in Crime Alley. The weather had driven most of Gotham's inhabitants indoors, leaving the streets unusually empty except for the occasional huddled figure racing between doorways. From above, their umbrellas formed a procession of black flowers opening and closing in the urban landscape. Dr. Leslie Thompkins' clinic remained a beacon of warm light against the grey backdrop, its windows glowing with promise even at this late hour. For decades, Leslie had tended to Gotham's forgotten, those who fell through society's cracks or who lived in shadows too deep for sunlight to reach. She had also been there the night Thomas and Martha Wayne died, one of the first to comfort a boy whose world had just collapsed. Batman entered through the rooftop access Leslie always left unlocked for him, making his way down the back stairwell. Water pooled beneath his boots, marking his passage through the otherwise immaculate hallway. The clinic was quiet at this hour. Most patients had been treated and released, or settled in the few recovery rooms. Leslie was waiting in her office, a cup of tea cooling on her desk. She didn't look up when he entered, continuing to review patient charts with the focused attention that had characterized her work for over 40 years. "You're dripping on my floor," she observed mildly, finally glancing up through reading glasses perched on her nose. Despite her advanced years, Leslie's eyes remained sharp, missing nothing. "And you look exhausted. When did you last sleep, Bruce?" He ignored the question, moving further into the office. Alfred mentioned a patient who encountered what they called a crimson ghost. Leslie removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Patient confidentiality still applies, even to you," she sighed. "But since this may involve public safety, a young woman came in 3 nights ago severely shaken. She had been attacked by 2 men near Saint-Denis Cathedral. She claimed a figure emerged from the fog, a presence that moved like liquid shadow and smelled of roses. The men fled in terror, but not before the figure whispered something to her." "What did it say?" Batman asked, tension evident in his posture. "Some sins echo forever," Leslie quoted. The phrase clearly meant something specific. "The interesting part is what happened next," the woman said. She suddenly felt overwhelmed by memories of her own past transgressions. Nothing criminal, just moments of moral failing she'd tried to forget. She experienced them with such intensity that she came here seeking sedation. Batman moved to the window, watching raindrops trace chaotic patterns down the glass. "Is she still here?" "No. She left yesterday morning, much calmer but deeply thoughtful. Said she was going to make amends with her estranged sister." Leslie came to stand beside him. "Bruce, I've seen the file on Andrea Beaumont. If this is truly her, she's not the same woman you once knew. Grief and vengeance change people in fundamental ways." "I know," he replied quietly. Leslie studied his profile, concern evident in her features. "You, of all people, should understand how tragedy can transform someone. But remember, while your pain forged you into a protector, it drove her toward becoming an executioner. She never completed that path," Batman countered. "She walked away." "Did she? Or did she simply postpone her reckoning?" Leslie placed a gentle hand on his armored forearm. "This city has enough ghosts haunting its streets, Bruce. Don't let old wounds cloud your judgment." His communit interrupted with Alfred's precise tone. "Sir, I've compiled the information you requested. There's been another incident, unusual fog, reported at the Gotham Cemetery, specifically near the Wayne family mausoleum." Batman pulled away from the window. "I have to go." "Of course you do," Leslie said with resignation. "But Bruce, whatever you find there, remember that some hauntings come from within. Andrea may be using your shared past to draw you into something deeper." He paused at the door. "What was your impression of her when she was with me before everything fell apart?" Leslie's expression softened with memory. "She brought light into your life when you were surrounded by shadow. For a brief time, she helped you imagine a future beyond your pain." Her eyes met his steadily. "But even then, she carried her own darkness, a determination that sometimes frightened me with its intensity." Batman nodded once, then disappeared into the hallway, leaving only puddles to mark his passing. Leslie returned to her desk, placing her hand on an old photograph partially hidden beneath patient files. A younger Bruce Wayne smiling genuinely beside a beautiful woman with auburn hair, both of them untouched by the tragedies that would soon reshape their destinies. "Oh, Andrea," she whispered to the empty room, "what echoes are you chasing through the rain?" Outside, the downpour intensified as Batman made his way toward Gotham Cemetery, the oldest and most elaborate burial ground in the city. Gothic mausoleums and weathered angels stretched across the landscaped grounds, their stone features worn smooth by centuries of Gotham's harsh elements. The cemetery stood on high ground, offering a panoramic view of the city's jagged skyline, now softened by curtains of rain. The Wayne Mausoleum occupied the most prominent position in the cemetery's oldest section, a marble structure with classical columns and the family crest carved above its heavy bronze doors. Batman approached cautiously, noting how the rain around the building behaved strangely, falling in an almost circular pattern, as if deflected by an invisible dome. "Alfred, I'm at the cemetery. The atmospheric conditions are unusual. The weather service reports no explanation for the localized anomalies, sir. And I've recovered fragmentary security footage showing a figure moving through fog near both Crimson Alley and the Cathedral District. The timestamp matches Dr. Thompkins' patient's encounter." Batman paused several yards from the mausoleum, watching as tendrils of mist curled around its base despite the heavy rain, behavior that defied natural physics. "Anything on Andrea?" No confirmed sightings since she left Gotham 3 years ago. However, there have been rumors of a figure matching the phantasm's description in Metropolis and Central City, always in connection with former mob associates who mysteriously renounced their criminal activities and made substantial anonymous donations to victims' charities. The information aligned with a pattern Batman had observed before leaving Mysterious Vengeance had evolved into something more complex than simple elimination. She was forcing atonement, using fear to extract redemption from those she deemed responsible for society's corruption. As he approached the mausoleum, the mist thickened, swirling in patterns too deliberate to be natural. The scent of roses permeated the air, growing stronger with each step. At the entrance, where rain should have been cascading down marble steps, the water instead flowed upward, defying gravity in ribbons of silver that encircled the columns. "Someone's manipulating the atmospheric conditions," Batman observed, scanning the area with multiple cowl filters. "No technology detected. This isn't any system I recognize." He placed his hand on the bronze door, finding it unnaturally warm despite the cold rain. As he pushed it open, the interior of the mausoleum glowed with soft, ambient light that seemed to emanate from the marble itself. The air inside was completely dry, creating a surreal boundary between the torrential downpour outside and the silent, pristine chamber within. The Wayne family crypt contained the remains of generations, their names and dates carved into the walls with solemn dignity. Thomas and Martha Wayne occupied the most recent vault, their shared marble plate inscribed with the simple epitaph, "Beloved parents who showed that true wealth lies in compassion." Before their resting place, a figure knelt in silent contemplation. Not the phantasm in full regalia, but Andrea Beaumont herself, dressed in a simple black coat, her auburn hair now streaked with premature silver. She didn't turn as Batman entered, but her posture indicated she was fully aware of his presence. "Hello, Bruce," she said softly, her voice carrying the same melodic quality he remembered, now layered with years of solitude. "I wondered how long it would take you to find me here. Andrea." He remained by the entrance, cape dripping onto the threshold while the interior remained mysteriously dry. "Why have you returned to Gotham?" She rose with fluid grace, finally turning to face him. Her beauty remained striking, though her features had sharpened with age and experience. Her eyes, once bright with possibility, now held shadows, deeper than the cowl could conceal. "Because the past is never truly buried," she replied, gesturing to the crypt around them. Isn't that what this place teaches us? That what came before continues to shape what is and what will be? She approached him slowly. You've been following my breadcrumb trail all night. You tell me why I'm here. Batman remained motionless as she circled him, noting the familiar scent of roses that had accompanied each mysterious incident. You've been using some form of technology to create these atmospheric effects. The messages, the fog, the scent, all designed to lead me through places connected to shared trauma. Very analytical, she said, with a hint of the smile he once knew. Always the detective. But you haven't answered the question. Why these specific locations? What connects Crimson Alley, Saint-Dumas Cathedral, and this mausoleum? He watched her carefully, aware that despite her casual demeanor, Andrea had proven herself dangerous and unpredictable in the past. They're all places where lives were irrevocably changed by violence, where paths diverged because of tragedy. Andrea nodded, approving of his insight. The night your parents died in that alley, you chose a path of justice without killing. When my father was murdered, I chose vengeance with no such restrictions. She paused beside Thomas and Martha's crypt. And St. Dumas Cathedral? That's where we stood together at my father's funeral, both of us already wearing masks, though only one was visible. What do you want, Andrea? Batman asked directly, his patience wearing thin with her symbolic maneuvering. Her expression hardened slightly. Completion. Resolution. The same things you patrol these streets searching for, night after night. She approached him again, stopping just beyond arm's reach. I've spent years hunting those responsible for corrupting Gotham, for creating the environment that took both our families from us, and I've discovered something you may not want to hear. I'm listening. The cycle never ends, because the true architects of corruption keep regenerating. Remove one head, two more appear. She gestured toward the crypt entrance, where rain continued to fall in impossible patterns. Gotham itself is the problem. A city built on bones and bargains, where wealth insulates the guilty and poverty condemns the innocent. Batman's posture tensed. If you've come back to continue your vendetta... No, she interrupted. I've come back to finish it differently. I've learned that fear can be more transformative than death. The ghosts I've been creating around the city have helped several of Gotham's elite experience the consequences of their actions in ways that have proven quite enlightening. You're manipulating people's emotions, Batman stated flatly, forcing them to relive their worst moments. Andrea's smile turned sad. Not so different from the fear you inspire, is it? Just more personalized. She reached into her coat pocket, removing what appeared to be a small, ornate mechanical device that emitted a faint blue glow. This is how I've been creating my ghost effects. Technology acquired during my travels. It manipulates water molecules and atmospheric conditions, creating localized phenomena that trigger emotional responses. Batman studied the device through his cowl's scanners, similar to technology Scarecrow has experimented with, but more refined. And without his crude toxins, Andrea confirmed. This doesn't create hallucinations. It simply enhances emotional memory, brings buried feelings to the surface, like ripples in rain puddles, showing what lies beneath. Who are you targeting? He demanded. Andrea returned the device to her pocket. The remaining members of the consortium that ordered my father's death. The same group that has been gradually retaking control of Gotham's underworld while hiding behind legitimate businesses. 3 names in particular: Councilman Warren Pierce, Judge Deborah Lake, and investment banker Harrison Gray. The names were familiar to Batman, all powerful figures in Gotham with suspected ties to criminal enterprises, though nothing had ever been proven. All three had been under his surveillance at various points, but had proven exceptionally careful about maintaining their public personas. These connections were in the files my father collected before he was killed, Andrea continued. Information he thought would protect us, but which, ultimately, signed his death warrant. I've spent years gathering evidence, following money trails and connecting dots across continents. Now, I'm ready to expose them, with your help or without it. By terrifying them into confession, Batman questioned skeptically. Fear tactics create unreliable results. Andrea shook her head, a hint of impatience crossing her features. By showing them their own souls in perfect clarity, then offering a choice: public confession and restitution, or the complete dismantling of their empires through information I've already positioned to release. The encounters with my ghost simply prepare them psychologically for the decision. Outside, lightning flashed across the Gotham sky, momentarily illuminating the interior of the mausoleum with stark brilliance. Thunder followed seconds later, its deep reverberations shaking the ancient marble. The storm was intensifying, mirroring the tension between two people who had once dreamed of a shared future, now standing on opposite sides of an ethical divide neither could fully cross. "Why bring me into this?" Batman finally asked. "You could have pursued this plan without leaving me a trail to follow." For the first time, Andrea's composure faltered slightly. "Because despite everything, Bruce, you're still my moral compass. The path I chose has taken me to dark places. Places where the line between justice and vengeance blurs until it's almost invisible." Her voice softened. "I needed to know if you would stop me, if what I'm doing has crossed your immovable line." Batman studied her, seeing beyond the confident exterior to the wounded soul beneath, a reflection not unlike what he sometimes glimpsed in his own rare moments of complete honesty. "Show me your evidence against them, all of it. Then we'll discuss methods." Andrea's relief was subtle but unmistakable. "It's comprehensive, enough to dismantle their operations permanently." She hesitated. "There's something else you should know. The consortium has connections to Wayne Enterprises, specifically through board members who've been quietly undermining your philanthropic initiatives for years." This was not entirely surprising. Batman had suspected corporate sabotage on several Wayne Foundation projects, though he hadn't identified the source. "Names? Robert Hayward and Victoria Marsh," Andrea supplied without hesitation. "They've been funneling technology and information to the consortium while systematically redirecting Wayne charitable funds to shell companies they control." The information aligned with anomalies Batman had begun investigating months ago. Having specific names would accelerate his own parallel inquiry considerably. "If your evidence substantiates these claims, they'll face justice through proper legal channels." Andrea's expression suggested she found his adherence to procedure quaint but expected. "The evidence is in a secure location. I can take you there now, but first..." She gestured toward the crypt entrance. "The rain is speaking to us, Bruce. Listen." Batman turned toward the doorway, where raindrops had begun arranging themselves in the air, hovering in a complex three-dimensional pattern that resembled a detailed map of Gotham. Specific locations glowed with faint luminescence. The three places Andrea had left her ghost messages, plus several others forming a constellation across the city's geography. Each point marks a location where a decision altered the course of Gotham's history, Andrea explained, stepping beside him to observe the liquid diagram. "Most people see only random chaos in the rain, but patterns exist for those willing to perceive them." She looked up at him. just as you've spent your life searching for order in Gotham's madness. The rain map rotated slowly in the air, revealing additional connections Batman immediately recognized. Lines linking crime scenes, corporate headquarters, and government buildings in a web of influence that corresponded with investigations he had conducted over years of vigilance. "Your technology is creating this visualization," he stated, though uncertainty tinged his observation. Andrea's smile contained secrets she seemed reluctant to share. Perhaps, or perhaps the truth has its own momentum, seeking expression through whatever medium is available. She reached toward the floating diagram, causing it to dissolve into ordinary raindrops that fell to the marble floor. Some would call it magic, others advanced science. The distinction matters less than the revelation. "Alfred," Batman sub-vocalized, "are you receiving this visual feed?" "Indeed, sir," came the butler's measured response. "Most remarkable. The pattern corresponds with several investigations you've conducted independently. If Miss Beaumont's evidence supports these connections, it would explain numerous inconsistencies we've encountered in recent years." Andrea watched him with knowing eyes. "Still consulting Alfred. Some things never change." She moved toward the exit. "Your loyal guardian always saw through my facade, you know. He recognized the darkness in me long before either of us acknowledged it. Saw potential in both of us," Batman corrected. "Different paths emerging from similar losses. And yet here we are, still orbiting the same gravity well of tragedy." Andrea paused at the threshold, where rain continued to fall in impossible patterns. "Will you come with me to examine the evidence? Or do we part ways again, each pursuing justice through our own method?" Batman studied her silhouette against the rain-soaked night. Andrea represented both what might have been and what he had narrowly avoided becoming. Someone willing to cross lines he had drawn in stone. Yet her intelligence and determination had always commanded his respect, even when her methods troubled his conscience. "I'll come," he decided. "But if your evidence doesn't support your claims, or if your methods cross into territory I can't, you'll stop me," she finished for him. "I would expect nothing less." She stepped into the rain, which parted around her like a living curtain. "We're taking the scenic route. I think it's time you saw Gotham through my eyes for a change." The cemetery gate creaked behind them as they departed, leaving the Wayne Mausoleum in serene silence once more. Inside, the marble appeared to retain a faint luminescence for several minutes after their departure, as if the stone itself had absorbed the energy of their exchange. Another secret added to the many held within those ancient walls. Through sheets of rain they traveled, Batman by grapnel and glide, Andrea through an uncanny ability to move with the mist itself, seeming to dissolve and reconstitute as she navigated Gotham's vertical landscape. Their destination emerged gradually through the downpour, an abandoned clock tower in Gotham's old financial district, its massive face dark for decades, but its structure still sound beneath layers of neglect. Few people remember that this was once the heartbeat of Gotham, Andrea commented as they entered through a maintenance door high above street level. Before Wayne Tower, before the modern skyscrapers, this clock tower regulated the rhythm of the city. The interior space was surprisingly dry and meticulously organized. What had once been the clockwork mechanism room had been transformed into an intelligence center that rivaled the Batcave's capabilities in focus, if not in scope. Multiple screens displayed data streams, surveillance footage, and financial records. Physical evidence, documents, photographs, and artifacts had been arranged on walls in precise constellations, connected by red threads that mapped relationships and influence. Impressive, Batman acknowledged, scanning the setup. How long have you been operating from here? 6 months, Andrea replied, moving to a central console. Though I've been gathering the information for years. She activated a sequence that brought all screens to life simultaneously. Everything is here. Financial records proving money laundering through Judge Lake's charity foundations. Surveillance showing Councilman Pierce meeting with known assassins 3 days before witnesses against him disappeared. Communication logs linking Banker Gray to offshore accounts that fund operations against Gotham's infrastructure. Batman moved methodically through the evidence, his cowl recording everything for later analysis. The case Andrea had built was comprehensive, methodical, and damning. Exactly the kind of evidence that should have resulted in prosecutions and convictions in a functioning justice system. You have enough here to destroy them legally, he observed. Why resort to your ghost tactics? Andrea's laugh held little humor. You still believe in Gotham's legal system? After everything you've seen? She gestured toward a section of her evidence wall labeled Judicial Compromise. They own judges, prosecutors, police captains. They've systematically corrupted every level of Gotham's justice infrastructure while maintaining public personas of civic virtue. Not everyone is corrupted, Batman countered. There are still honest people in the system. Yes, the rare exceptions that prove the rule. Andrea's tone softened. Bruce, I tried the legitimate route first. 3 years ago, I provided a fraction of this evidence to the district attorney's office. Within 24 hours, the evidence had vanished from their secure storage, and the assistant DA handling the case was found dead from an apparent suicide. Batman moved to that section of her evidence wall, finding photographs of a crime scene he recognized. Lauren Mills, a promising young prosecutor he'd worked with on several cases, found hanging in her apartment. The official ruling had been suicide, but he'd had his doubts. I investigated Mills' death, he said quietly. The evidence was inconclusive, because it was professionally obscured, Andrea replied, bringing up additional photographs showing subtle details Batman had also noted. Discrepancies in the knot pattern, unexplained bruising partially hidden by the ligature marks. She was murdered for doing exactly what you're suggesting, trying to pursue this legally. The rain drummed against the clock tower's massive face, creating a somber percussion that filled the silence between them. Batman continued examining the evidence, finding connections that aligned with investigations he had pursued through different angles, filling gaps in cases that had frustratingly dead-ended despite his best efforts. The Wayne Enterprises connection, he finally said. Show me. Andrea brought up financial records and internal communications, evidence that board members Haywood and Marsh had been systematically undermining Wayne charitable initiatives while siphoning technology to criminal enterprises. The pattern was subtle, but unmistakable once the complete picture emerged. They've been particularly focused on disrupting your urban renewal projects, Andrea explained. Abandoned buildings and condemned blocks create operational bases for criminal activities. Every time Wayne Foundation tries to rehabilitate these areas, their efforts are quietly sabotaged from within. Batman's jaw tightened as years of frustration found their explanation. Projects he had personally championed as Bruce Wayne, affordable housing developments, community health centers, youth outreach facilities, all had faced mysterious setbacks, budget shortfalls, and regulatory complications, despite his resources and influence. Alfred, he sub-vocalized, initiate Protocol Janus for board members Haywood and Marsh, full surveillance, financial tracking, communication monitoring. Already underway, sir, came the prompt reply. Miss Beaumont's evidence appears quite thorough. Preliminary verification shows consistent patterns with anomalies we've tracked independently. Andrea watched him process the information, her expression reflecting understanding of his internal conflict. This is why I came back to Gotham, Bruce. Not just for vengeance or justice, but because the corruption has finally reached the heart of your own operation, threatening everything you're trying to build as both Batman and Bruce Wayne. She approached him, stopping just short of physical contact. My methods may disturb you, but they've proven effective. The ghosts I've created have already motivated 2 mid-level operatives to turn evidence against their superiors. Fear of what they've done, truly experiencing the emotional weight of their actions, has proven more motivating than any physical intimidation. Batman turned from the evidence wall to face her directly. You're inducing artificial emotional states to manipulate behavior. That's dangerous territory, Andrea. Is it so different from the fear you cultivate? She challenged. The shadow you cast over criminals, the symbol you've created to haunt their nightmares. She gestured to his costume. We both use fear as a tool. I've simply refined the application. Outside, lightning flashed again, illuminating the clock tower's interior through its massive face. Thunder followed almost immediately, indicating the storm was now directly overhead. The rain intensified further, sheets of water cascading down the clock's glass with hypnotic intensity. I want to believe there's still a line you won't cross, Batman said finally. That despite everything, you haven't become what you once hunted. Andrea's expression softened with unexpected vulnerability. That's why I revealed myself to you, why I left that trail for you to follow. She moved to the window, placing her hand against the rain-streaked glass. I needed someone who remembers who I was before everything changed. Someone who could see if I've gone too far. The admission hung between them, an unexpected moment of honesty from someone who had lived behind masks as long as he had. Batman joined her at the window, both of them looking out at Gotham through curtains of rain. The evidence is solid, he acknowledged, and the targets deserve justice. But we do this my way. No more psychological manipulation, no more ghosts. And when your way meets the same resistance it always has, Andrea questioned. When evidence disappears, witnesses recant, and prosecutors suddenly drop charges. Then we adapt, Batman replied firmly, but we don't compromise fundamental principles. Once that line blurs, Andrea, there's no clear path back. She studied him for a long moment, rainlight reflecting in eyes that had seen too much darkness. You still believe redemption is possible, even for someone like me? It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. I have to believe that. Otherwise, what am I fighting for? The momentary vulnerability in her expression hardened into resolve. Very well. We'll try your approach first. But understand that I've come too far to watch these people escape consequences again. She turned back to her evidence wall. We start with Judge Lake. She's scheduled to preside over a case tomorrow that directly involves one of the consortium's operations. If she rules as they've instructed her to, another innocent person goes to prison, while the guilty walk free. Batman nodded. I'll handle Judge Lake. You compile everything on Councilman Pierce, especially his connection to the witness disappearances. And Haywood Marsh? Andrea asked. The cancer within your own house? Alfred is already implementing countermeasures, Batman replied. By morning, they'll find themselves isolated from sensitive operations, while an independent audit, coincidentally, targets their departments. They worked through the night, the storm providing appropriate accompaniment to their methodical dismantling of corruption networks. Andrea's evidence, combined with Batman's existing case files, created a comprehensive map of Gotham's shadow power structure, connections that had remained hidden because no one had assembled all the pieces simultaneously. As dawn approached, the rain finally began to subside, exhausted clouds thinning to reveal glimpses of sky brightening toward morning. Batman stood at the clock tower window, watching Gotham emerge from darkness once more. Buildings glistening with moisture, streets washed temporarily clean. "It never truly changes, does it?" Andrea observed, joining him after securing her evidence for transport. "No matter how many times we try to cleanse it, the city accumulates new layers of darkness." "It changes," Batman disagreed quietly. "Slowly, imperfectly, but it changes. Every child who grows up a little safer, every family that doesn't experience what we did, that's change worth fighting for." Andrea's smile carried bittersweet acknowledgement. Always the optimist beneath the cowl. She gathered her coat, preparing to depart. "I'll deliver the evidence on Pierce as we discussed. After that..." She hesitated. "After that, I should leave Gotham again. My presence here complicates your work." Batman turned from the window. "You don't have to disappear this time." "Don't I?" she challenged gently. "Gotham already has its guardian, Bruce, and we both know there isn't room for my approach alongside yours, not long term." She moved toward the exit, pausing to look back at him. "But perhaps next time, I won't stay away quite so long." He didn't try to stop her, recognizing the truth in her assessment. Their paths had aligned briefly once more, but their fundamental approaches to justice remained irreconcilable, despite their shared goals. Some distances couldn't be bridged, even by those who understood each other's pain most intimately. "Andrea," he called as she reached the door. "The rose in Crimson Alley. Was that really just technology?" Her smile contained mysteries she would never fully share. "Some questions are better left as echoes in the rain, Bruce." With that, she stepped into the morning mist, her figure seeming to dissolve into the lingering fog, until he could no longer distinguish between woman and atmosphere. Batman remained in the clock tower for several minutes after her departure, watching as golden morning light gradually pierced the thinning clouds. The rain had finally stopped, leaving Gotham glistening in momentary cleanliness that would fade all too quickly. He activated his comm unit. "Alfred, I'm returning with evidence. Prepare for immediate action on all fronts we discussed." "Very good, sir. May I ask about Miss Beaumont?" Batman looked toward where Andrea had disappeared, knowing she was already far beyond his immediate reach, a ghost once more haunting Gotham's margins. "She's gone. For now." "I see." Alfred's tone conveyed understanding of all that remained unspoken. "And the matter of the rose, sir? Did she explain that particular phenomenon?" "No," Batman replied, gathering the compiled evidence. "Some mysteries she keeps to herself. Perhaps that's for the best," Alfred observed thoughtfully. "Even you are occasionally permitted to wonder rather than know with certainty." As Batman prepared to depart, he noticed something on the windowsill that hadn't been there before. A single drop of water that refused to obey gravity, hovering slightly above the surface. Within its crystalline structure, light refracted to create a miniature rainbow, 7 perfect colors, suspended in momentary harmony, before finally yielding to natural law and merging with the dampness below. Some questions would indeed remain as echoes in the rain, reverberating through memory, long after their source had faded into silence. The morning found Bruce Wayne in his study at Wayne Manor, watching dawn spread across the estate's rain-soaked grounds. Alfred entered with a breakfast tray, setting it on the desk with practiced precision. "You haven't slept, Master Bruce," he observed, pouring coffee into a porcelain cup. "Even for you, this borders on excessive devotion to duty." Bruce accepted the coffee gratefully. "Too much in motion, Alfred. Judge Lake's sealed financial records are being delivered to Commissioner Gordon as we speak. The evidence against Pierce will reach investigative journalists at 3 separate publications by noon, and the Wayne Enterprises board meets at 10 to discuss the troubling irregularities discovered in an overnight audit." "A productive evening, then," Alfred acknowledged, his expression betraying subtle satisfaction. "And yet, if I may observe, you seem unsettled in a way that transcends mere physical exhaustion." Bruce turned from the window, studying his oldest friend and confidant. Andrea's approach, there were moments when it made sense, Alfred, when her methods seemed more direct, more effective than mine. "Ah," Alfred straightened slightly, "the eternal temptation of shortcuts, of power without the restraint of principle." "It wasn't that simple," Bruce countered. "She showed me the direct consequences of adhering too rigidly to a system that's been compromised. Good people dying because I insisted on playing by rules our enemies ignore." Alfred's expression softened with understanding. "If I may, sir, the difference between you and Miss Beaumont has never been about effectiveness. It's about what remains when the immediate battle ends." He gestured toward the grounds outside, where morning light transformed lingering raindrops into countless prisms. "She leaves behind fear and manipulation, however justified. You strive to leave hope and the possibility of redemption." Bruce considered this as he sipped his coffee. "She's not wrong about how deeply the corruption runs." "Perhaps not," Alfred conceded, "but depth of infection doesn't dictate method of treatment. Some physicians amputate at the first sign of gangrene. Others work tirelessly to preserve what can be saved, while excising only what must be lost." He paused, his voice gentling further. "Your parents believed in healing Gotham, not merely punishing it. In that you have honored their memory far more faithfully than perhaps you realize." The mention of his parents brought Bruce's attention to a small framed photograph on his desk. Thomas and Martha Wayne at a charity gala, their expressions conveying the genuine compassion that had defined their lives and work. Beside it lay a folded newspaper clipping from decades ago, preserved despite its yellowing edges, a review of a charity benefit attended by a young Bruce Wayne and his then-fiancée, Andrea Beaumont, both described as continuing the Wayne legacy of philanthropy with evident sincerity. Two paths that had diverged so dramatically from such similar beginnings. "There's something else, Alfred," Bruce admitted. "Something Andrea said about the rose in Crimson Alley. She implied it wasn't entirely technological, that some aspects of what she's been doing transcend simple explanation." Alfred's expression remained carefully neutral. "You've encountered phenomena beyond conventional understanding before, sir. From Lazarus Pits to the metaphysical abilities of certain associates. The world contains more mysteries than even your considerable intellect has catalogued." "You think she's accessed something supernatural?" Bruce asked. "I think," Alfred replied, measured, "that grief and purpose, when focused with sufficient intensity over years, may manifest in ways science hasn't fully documented. Miss Beaumont's determination has always been her most formidable characteristic, perhaps even more so than her considerable intelligence." Bruce turned back to the window, watching as the last vestiges of storm clouds dissipated on the horizon. "She'll be back, Alfred. When this phase concludes, when these particular targets face justice, she'll find new corruption to confront." "Undoubtedly, sir. The question is whether she returns as an ally who challenges your methods, or as someone you must oppose more directly. Alfred began tidying the desk with practiced efficiency. Though perhaps the more immediate question is whether you'll finally get some rest before confronting the board at this morning's meeting. Bruce's smile was faint but genuine, just a short one. Wake me in an hour? 90 minutes, Alfred countered firmly. Even Batman requires adequate recovery time. As Bruce made his way upstairs to his bedroom, exhaustion finally overtaking his disciplined resistance, he paused at a window overlooking Gotham in the distance. The city seemed transformed by the night's cleansing rain, its usual greyness temporarily replaced by reflective brilliance as sunlight caught countless wet surfaces. For this brief moment, it was the city he had always fought for, the Gotham that could be rather than the one that too often was. Somewhere within that temporarily renewed landscape, Andrea moved like mist between buildings, her presence both substantial and ephemeral. Their paths would cross again, of that he had no doubt. The question was whether their next intersection would find them standing on common ground or opposed across an unbridgeable divide. As sleep finally claimed him, Bruce's dreams were filled with roses that defied gravity, rain that whispered secrets, and cathedral bells that tolled for all of Gotham's lost souls. Those who had already fallen and those who still walked the precipice between darkness and light, their fates yet to be decided by the choices they would make when confronted with their own personal echoes in the rain. In the days that followed, Gotham experienced what the press called the Great Cleansing, a sudden exposure of corruption that shook the city's power structures to their foundations. Judge Deborah Lake resigned amid accusations of judicial misconduct and evidence of bribery. Councilman Warren Pierce faced multiple federal indictments after journalists published documented connections to organized crime. And, at Wayne Enterprises, board members Hayward and Marsh were removed following an emergency session that revealed their systematic undermining of company initiatives. Bruce Wayne made public appearances supporting the investigations, his composed demeanor betraying none of the satisfaction he felt watching justice finally reach those who had believed themselves untouchable. At night, Batman monitored the ripple effects through Gotham's criminal ecosystem as various operations suddenly found themselves without their high-level protection. A week after Andrea's departure, as the upheaval began stabilizing into new patterns of power and accountability, Batman encountered an unusual figure during his patrol, a street poet who had set up a small performance space near Crimson Alley, reciting verses to a gathered crowd despite the late hour. "The crimson ghost walks through our reign," the poet intoned, his voice carrying surprising authority for someone so young. "Not seeking blood, but truths remain. Through foggy veils and misty sighs, she makes the guilty realize." Batman observed from a nearby rooftop, noting how intently the audience listened. A mixture of Gotham's forgotten souls, from homeless veterans to late-night workers to university students seeking authenticity in the city's margins. The poet continued his performance, weaving imagery of rain and fog, justice and memory, into an urban mythology that transformed Andrea's actions into something approaching legend. "Even your ghost leaves echoes," Batman sub-vocalized, knowing Alfred would hear through the cowl's communication system. "Creative interpretations spread rather quickly," Alfred replied dryly, "though I dare say there's something appropriate about Miss Beaumont's methods inspiring poetry rather than police reports." The poet concluded his performance to enthusiastic applause, receiving modest donations from his appreciative audience. As the crowd dispersed, Batman descended to street level, emerging from shadows just as the young man began packing his minimal equipment. "Interesting material," Batman observed, causing the poet to startle visibly before composing himself with admirable quickness. The Bat himself, the young man acknowledged with a respectful nod, come to critique my artistic interpretation of recent events. Come to understand what you've heard, Batman corrected. Your descriptions of the Crimson Ghost contain details not published in any media reports. The poet's expression shifted to something more serious. People talk to poets differently than they talk to cops or reporters. We're keepers of stories, not evidence. He shouldered his worn backpack. 3 separate people came to me with experiences they couldn't explain. Encounters with fog that whispered their secrets back to them. Moments where rain fell upward instead of down. Roses appearing in places connected to old griefs. And you transformed their accounts into mythology, Batman observed. The poet shrugged. Mythology is how humans process the inexplicable. Always has been. He studied Batman with unexpected perceptiveness. Though I suspect you know more about this particular ghost than anyone. Batman remained impassive. What's your name? Michael Thomas, the young man replied, graduate student in Gotham University's literature program. Street poetry pays tuition when scholarships fall short. Your Crimson Ghost, Batman said after a moment's consideration. What do you think her purpose was? Michael considered the question seriously. From what I've gathered, she wasn't interested in punishment so much as recognition, making people truly see what they've done, what they've become. His expression turned thoughtful. There's an old belief that ghosts remain when something important is left unfinished. Maybe she's trying to complete something that was interrupted long ago. The insight was surprisingly close to truth for someone working only from second-hand accounts and creative intuition. Your audience seems deeply invested in the story. People need to believe justice is possible, Michael replied simply. Even justice that comes through unusual channels, especially in Gotham. He hesitated before adding, the rain stopped after the 3 powerful people fell. People noticed that correlation. In their minds, the ghost cleansed the city, then departed when her work was done. Batman considered the poetic symmetry of this interpretation, not entirely accurate, yet capturing an essential truth about Andrea's intentions. Keep writing, Michael Thomas. Gotham needs its storytellers as much as its protectors. With that, he retreated into the shadows, leaving the young poet staring after him with the expression of someone who had just received unusual material for his next performance. Days became weeks, and Andrea's visible influence gradually faded from Gotham's conscious awareness, though Batman occasionally noted subtle signs of her continued presence. A rose appearing at a crime scene where justice had been previously denied. Reports of unusually localized fog near the residences of corrupt officials who subsequently made abrupt changes to their behavior. 1 month after their encounter in the clock tower, Batman found himself drawn to the cathedral district during a light evening rainfall. St. Dumas Cathedral rose above surrounding buildings, its Gothic architecture emphasizing vertical connection between earth and sky. On impulse, he ascended to its bell tower, finding unexpected peace in the harmonious sound of raindrops striking ancient bronze. I wondered if you'd come here eventually, a familiar voice observed from deeper shadows. Andrea stepped forward, no longer in her phantasm guise, but dressed simply in civilian clothes. Something about cathedrals and rain seems to draw both of us. Batman didn't feign surprise at her continued presence in Gotham. You never left. I started to, she admitted. Made it as far as the city limits before turning back. Too much unfinished business. She moved beside him. both of them looking out over the rain-silvered city. The consortium is wounded but not destroyed. New figureheads will emerge to replace those who fell, and you'll be watching them, Batman concluded. Not a question. Andrea nodded, rainlight reflecting in her eyes. As will you, though our methods remain different. She studied him with the intimate familiarity of someone who had known both the man and the mask. The poet in Crimson Alley, he's good, captures something essential about what happened. Mythology serves a purpose, Batman acknowledged. Creates meaning from chaos. Isn't that what we both do, ultimately? Andrea mused. Create meaning from the chaos that claimed our families, just through different approaches. The observation hung between them, too accurate for comfortable denial. They stood in silence for several minutes, listening to rain on ancient stone, each respecting the other's thoughts without demanding their articulation. I won't interfere with your work, Andrea finally said, as long as you don't interfere with mine. Gotham's large enough for both our approaches, targeting different levels of corruption. Batman turned to face her directly. No deaths, no permanent psychological damage. Those are my conditions. Agreed, she replied without hesitation. I've found fear more effective than elimination anyway. People who believe they're haunted tend to focus remarkably well on atonement. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by gentle thunder that seemed to vibrate through the cathedral's very stones. The rain intensified slightly, creating a silver curtain around their meeting place. We won't meet like this again, Batman said, recognizing practical reality, too complicated for both of us. Andrea's smile held the sadness of accepted truth. No, but perhaps Bruce Wayne and Andrea Beaumont might occasionally cross paths at some charity function or gallery opening. Two old friends with complicated history, but mutual respect. The suggestion carried unexpected appeal, acknowledgement that beneath their adopted personas and divergent paths, a connection remained that neither could fully sever nor fully embrace. Perhaps, he conceded, though I suspect you'll be quite busy with your particular form of social reform, as will you with yours. She stepped closer, briefly touching his armored shoulder, a gesture that bridged present distance and past intimacy. The rain is easing, time for ghosts and bats to continue their separate patrols. Batman watched as she moved toward the bell tower stairs. Andrea, he called softly. The rose in Crimson Alley. One day you'll tell me the truth about that. She paused without turning. One day, she agreed, when we've both made enough peace with the past to hear it, without reopening old wounds. With that, she descended into shadow, leaving Batman alone with the gradually clearing sky. The rain had indeed begun to ease, clouds parting to reveal glimpses of stars emerging in the night. Below, Gotham continued its eternal cycle of corruption and renewal, darkness and light, engaged in their perpetual dance across urban landscape and human heart alike. He remained in the bell tower until the rain stopped completely, watching as his city shook off water from its countless surfaces. Somewhere in that vast maze of streets and structures, Andrea moved like mist between buildings. Not quite enemy, not quite ally, but something more complex that defied simple categorization. They would continue their separate approaches to healing Gotham's wounds, occasionally crossing paths, but maintaining the distance that their chosen methods demanded. And perhaps someday, when enough time had passed and enough justice had been served, they might finally understand the echoes that continued to reverberate through their lives, persistent as rain, transformative as grief, enduring as the memory of what might have been and what still might be, in a city that forever balanced on the edge between despair and hope. As the last echoes of rain faded from Gotham's streets, Batman continued his eternal vigil over the city. The encounter with Andrea Beaumont, with the Phantasm, had stirred memories long buried beneath layers of duty and purpose. Yet such is the life of Gotham's guardian. One mystery resolves as another emerges from the shadows. The clouds that had drenched the city for days finally dispersed, revealing a sky painted with stars. Batman stood atop Wayne Tower, his cape catching the gentle night breeze. Below him, Gotham pulsed with its nocturnal rhythms, some innocent, others sinister. The brief peace following Andrea's departure would not last long. It never did. Alfred's voice came through the cowl's communication system, measured as always, but with an undercurrent of concern that Batman immediately recognized. "Sir, I'm afraid there's a situation developing in the abandoned arts district. Reports of unusual activity. The police are describing sounds that don't appear human." Batman's gaze turned toward the distant collection of warehouses and forgotten theaters that had once been Gotham's cultural center, now fallen into disrepair and darkness. "Details?" he asked, already preparing to move. "Fragmented at best," Alfred replied, "but there are mentions of music, sir. Discordant melodies playing from buildings thought empty for years, and—" he hesitated. "Reports of missing persons from nearby neighborhoods, people vanishing without trace, only to be glimpsed later, changed somehow." Batman launched his grapnel into the night. "I'm on my way." As he swung through the cool night air toward another mystery, another darkness to confront, the last lingering sense of rain gave way to something else on the wind. The faint but unmistakable smell of antiseptic, underlying notes of decay, and, strangest of all, the subtle fragrance of perfume. In Gotham, the night always brings new horrors, and in the abandoned arts district, someone was orchestrating a performance unlike any the city had witnessed before. A nocturne of the broken, conducted by hands both skilled and utterly mad. The Phantasm's reign had passed. Now a different storm was brewing, one that would test Batman's resolve in ways even Andrea's ghost could not have foreseen. Moonlight spilled across Gotham like silver paint, illuminating the city's Gothic architecture with an ethereal glow that transformed even its darkest corners into works of haunting beauty. From his vantage point atop the Gotham Opera House, Batman watched as wind-scattered newspapers danced across empty streets, their movements echoing the ghostly choreography of a forgotten ballet. The city had a different rhythm at night, a nocturne composed of distant sirens, whispered conversations, and the ever-present hum of urban electricity. Tonight, however, a discordant note had entered this familiar symphony. "Third victim found this morning," Commissioner Gordon's voice crackled through the comlink in Batman's cowl. Same signature as the others, porcelain mask fused to the face, the word "perfect" inscribed on the forehead. Victim was alive, but changed. Medicals still trying to figure out exactly what was done to them. Batman's eyes narrowed beneath his cowl as he processed this information. Location: abandoned costume shop in the theater district. Place has been closed for years, but someone's been using it. We found surgical equipment, though nothing high-end. Whoever's doing this is improvising with what they can find. The theater district had once been Gotham's cultural crown jewel, where the city's elite gathered to see and be seen. Economic downturns had transformed it into a shadow of its former glory. Marquees dark, velvet seats gathering dust. Now it seemed something even darker had taken residence among the faded glamour. "Am heading there now," Batman replied, his voice low and measured. Have your people pull back. There may be evidence they've missed. Already done. They know the drill by now. Gordon paused, and Batman could hear him exhaling cigarette smoke. There's something else. This victim was clutching a playbill, not from any show I've ever heard of. It's titled The Final Performance, a grand celebration of perfection. Lists a date 3 nights from now, but no venue. Send me the images, Batman instructed, already launching himself from his perch. His cape caught the night air, transforming into rigid wings that carried him over Gotham's labyrinthian streets. The theater district lay before him, a collection of ornate buildings whose faded grandeur recalled an era when art and beauty had been Gotham's aspiration rather than a distant memory. As he glided toward his destination, Alfred's voice joined the conversation. I've received the Commissioner's files, sir. Most concerning, the mask appears to be custom-made for each victim, molded to their facial structure, but idealized. Features smoothed, proportions altered to match classical standards of beauty. Someone's idea of perfection, Batman observed, landing silently on a decaying awning. The costume shop lay just ahead, its windows boarded up, its once vibrant signage now faded to ghostly outlines. Indeed, sir. And the modifications don't stop at the mask. Preliminary medical reports indicate substantial surgical alterations beneath, muscle tissue reshaped, in some cases bones remodeled, all without proper medical protocols. It's a miracle the victim survived at all. Batman's jaw tightened. They weren't meant to survive. They were meant to be transformed. The costume shop's rear entrance had been recently used, the accumulated grime on the handle disturbed, faint footprints visible in the dust. Batman slipped inside, his cowl automatically adjusting to the dimness. What had once been a treasure trove of theatrical magic now resembled a nightmare. Mannequins stood in silent rows, their blank faces watching as he moved through the space. Costumes hung like the shed skins of strange creatures, their colors muted by time and neglect. The main workroom had been converted into a grotesque operating theater. A chair reminiscent of those used by dentists dominated the center, modified with restraints and surrounded by rolling trays of instruments. Some were legitimate surgical tools. Others appeared to be repurposed from costume-making equipment, scissors, needles, forms for shaping masks. Alfred, I'm sending you images of the setup, Batman said, his cowl's camera capturing the disturbing scene. This is methodical work. Our suspect has medical knowledge, possibly surgical experience, combined with artistic training. Cross-referencing now, sir. The craftsmanship on these masks is quite distinctive. Porcelain work of this quality requires specific skills. Alfred's typing was audible in the background. I'm also analyzing the handwriting on that playbill. Batman moved methodically through the space, gathering evidence without disturbing the scene. Beneath the chair partially hidden, he found a small music box. When opened, it played a delicate tinkling melody that Batman immediately recognized as a simplified version of an aria from the Magic Flute, Mozart's opera about transformation and trials. Our suspect has a fondness for opera, he noted, carefully bagging the music box, specifically pieces about metamorphosis, becoming something new. The theater district does include the old Gotham Opera House, Alfred replied, abandoned since the Wayne Foundation diverted its funding to the new Performing Arts Center downtown. There was a hint of reproach in his voice that Batman didn't miss. Father thought the city needed something modern, unburdened by the past. Batman responded quietly. He couldn't have known how quickly the old district would decline. Batman's attention was drawn to a cabinet that seemed newer than the shop's other furnishings. Inside, he found rows of porcelain masks in various stages of completion, each one beautiful in a cold, perfect way. Behind the masks, a notebook contained detailed sketches of faces, some recognizable as the victims already discovered, others unknown. Each sketch showed a before face and then an after, with the imperfections removed, features idealized. "He's planning more transformations," Batman said grimly. "The playbill wasn't just theater, he's building towards something he considers a masterpiece." As Batman turned to leave, something crunched beneath his boot, a shard of porcelain that had fallen behind a workbench. He bent to examine it and found it was the broken corner of a mask bearing a partial signature, Laszlo V. "Alfred, check the name Laszlo V against known offenders with medical or artistic backgrounds." The response came almost immediately. "Laszlo Valentine, sir. Former plastic surgeon whose license was revoked after patients complained about unauthorized procedures. He claimed to be improving them beyond what they'd consented to. After his medical career ended, he worked briefly as a mask maker for the Gotham Opera, before being dismissed for increasingly erratic behavior. He disappeared from public record approximately 3 years ago. The Valentine, someone who believed he knew better than his patients what would make them beautiful." "There's more, sir. Valentine had a particular fixation on classical standards of beauty, wrote several rejected academic papers arguing that modern aesthetic medicine was too constrained by patients' wishes rather than objective perfection. He was particularly drawn to opera because, in his words, it transformed flawed humans into vessels of perfect sound. Send me his last known address and any properties connected to him," Batman instructed, already moving toward the exit. "And Alfred, look into any connections between Valentine and the theater district, especially the old opera house. I have a feeling our final performance might be staged somewhere significant to him." Gotham General Hospital maintained a special wing for victims of the city's more unusual crimes, a necessary adaptation in a place that had seen everything from Scarecrow's fear toxin to Poison Ivy's botanical manipulations. The first victim, discovered with one of Valentine's masks, had been transferred here after conventional medical facilities proved unable to address their condition. Dr. Leslie Thompkins met Batman on the roof, her expression grim. "I wondered when you'd show up. Our patient's stabilized, but there are complications. The mask isn't just attached, it's integrated. The material has bonded with the underlying tissue in ways I've never seen before. Removing it would cause catastrophic damage." "I need to speak with them," Batman said. Dr. Thompkins led Batman through quiet corridors to a private room where a figure sat motionless by the window. In the moonlight, the porcelain mask gleamed with an unearthly beauty, perfect symmetrical features, lips curved in a serene smile that never reached the human eyes visible through the eye holes. "My name is Batman," he said quietly, approaching the figure with measured steps. "I'm here to help find the person who did this to you." The masked figure turned slowly, movements deliberate and graceful in a way that seemed practiced rather than natural. "Why would I want you to find him?" The voice was soft, measured, with a musical quality that hadn't been present in the recordings of the victim's previous statements to police. "He made me perfect." Batman carefully seated himself across from the victim, a person named Morgan Chen, according to their file, formerly a street performer in the theater district. "Perfect in whose eyes, Morgan?" "In the eyes of true beauty." The masked figure gestured toward the window, toward the distant lights of the theater district. "He showed me what I could become. The first performance was painful, yes, but art requires sacrifice." "First performance?" Batman prompted gently. "The transformation is just the beginning." We are his instruments now, being tuned for the final performance. The mask's fixed smile seemed to take on a different quality in the dim light. 3 nights from now, the whole city will see what true perfection means. He's chosen his chorus carefully. Where is this performance happening, Morgan? There are others he plans to transform. You could help them. The masked figure tilted their head, the movement oddly mechanical. Help them avoid transcendence. Why would I do that? They leaned forward slightly. He said you might come. The man who wears a mask but fears transformation. He said you're afraid of perfection because it would mean giving up the broken boy inside you. Batman kept his expression neutral. Valentine doesn't know me. Doesn't he? Morgan's voice took on a sing-song quality. He says the wealthy build grand opera houses, then abandon them, just as they abandon the broken people of this city. The final performance will be a reunion, bringing Gotham's forgotten beauty back to those who discarded it. A nurse appeared at the doorway, signaling to Batman that the patient needed rest. As he rose to leave, Morgan called after him. He's watching you, you know, testing you, the masks you wear. He wonders which is the real one and which is the disguise. In the corridor, Dr. Thompkins handed Batman a medical file. This might help. We've been analyzing the porcelain compound. It's unique, contains traces of materials typically found in theatrical makeup, particularly the kind used in opera to create the appearance of perfect skin under stage lights. But it's been modified, combined with a polymer that bonds to human tissue. There's something else you should know, Dr. Thompkins added, her voice lowered. We found musical notations inked onto the inside of the mask, visible only through our imaging. Each victim has different notes. Together they might form a composition. He's literally inscribing his art onto his victims, Batman said. Thank you, Leslie. Keep me updated on any changes in their condition. As Batman departed through the hospital's service corridors, Alfred's voice returned through the comlink. Sir, I've been researching Valentine's connection to the theater district as requested. He was employed at the Gotham Opera House during its final season before closure. According to staff interviews conducted after his medical license was revoked, he was particularly obsessed with the opera Pygmalion, the story of a sculptor who creates a statue so perfect he falls in love with it, whereupon the gods bring it to life. Pygmalion, Batman repeated, the connection suddenly clear. The sculptor who believed he could create perfection. Valentine sees himself in that role, transforming living people into his idea of perfect art. Precisely, sir. And there's more. After his dismissal, Valentine apparently continued to access the opera house illegally. Security reported finding evidence someone was living in the sub-basement, the area once used for costume and makeup storage. Batman was already changing course, heading toward the ornate facade of the Gotham Opera House. That's where he'll stage his final performance. It's not just a building to him, it's a symbol of the beauty he thinks society has abandoned. The Gotham Opera House had once been the crowning jewel of the city's cultural life, a magnificent structure whose architecture blended Gothic revival with Art Nouveau influences. Now its grandeur was faded, windows boarded, intricate stonework crumbling in places, yet even in decline it maintained a haunting beauty, a ghost of artistic aspiration that refused to completely surrender to decay. Batman bypassed the main entrance, knowing it would be sealed, and instead accessed the building through the old service tunnels that connected many of Theater District's grand venues. These passages had once allowed performers and stagehands to move between buildings during Gotham's cultural heyday. particularly during the elaborate festivals that would occupy multiple venues simultaneously. The tunnels were dark and damp, water seeping through aging concrete. Batman moved silently, his cowl's enhanced vision revealing the path ahead. As he ventured deeper beneath the opera house, he detected something unexpected, the faint strains of music echoing through the passages. Not recorded music, but the delicate notes of a piano being played live. The melody, hauntingly beautiful despite its discordant undertones. "Alfred, I'm hearing music from within the building. Valentine may be present. Exercise extreme caution, sir." Valentine's psychological evaluations after his medical license was revoked indicated significant detachment from reality. He genuinely believes he's performing a service by perfecting people against their will. The music grew louder as Batman approached a junction in the tunnels, one path leading toward the main basement, another descending deeper toward areas that predated the opera house itself. The notes were complex now, layered with emotion that ranged from tender to frantic within the space of a few measures. Batman chose the deeper path, following the music to its source. The tunnel opened into a vast sub-basement that had been transformed into a grotesque workshop. Surgical equipment stood alongside makeup tables and costume forms. The walls were covered with anatomical drawings, interspersed with classical artwork depicting ideal human forms. Greek statues, Renaissance paintings, ballet dancers captured in moments of perfect poise. At the center of this disturbing gallery, a man sat at an antique piano, his fingers dancing across the keys with undeniable mastery. He wore surgical scrubs, but they were styled to resemble formal evening wear, complete with a bow tie. Most disturbingly, he wore a pig mask, not porcelain like his victims, but a more elaborate creation that covered his entire head, crafted with unsettling attention to detail. Batman remained in the shadows, observing. Around the piano stood a dozen mannequins arranged like an audience, each wearing a porcelain mask similar to those found on the victims. But these weren't mannequins, Batman realized with growing horror. They were people, standing unnaturally still, their rhythmic breathing the only indication they were alive. The music stopped abruptly, the final note hanging in the air like a question. The masked figure turned toward the shadows where Batman concealed himself. "I know you're there," the man said, his voice surprisingly melodious despite the pig mask that covered his face. "The Dark Knight, come to witness my rehearsal. Please, don't lurk in the wings. Every performance needs a critic." Batman stepped forward, moving deliberately into the dim light. "Dr. Valentine." The masked figure stood, bowing with theatrical flourish. "That name belongs to a person who no longer exists. I am Professor Pig now, the artist who will bring perfection back to this imperfect city." He gestured toward his silent, masked audience. "Do you admire my Dolatrons? Each one unique, yet each one perfect in their new form." "You've hurt these people," Batman said, his voice low and controlled. "Transformed them against their will." "Hurt?" Pig seemed genuinely confused by the concept. "One cannot create beauty without breaking what is flawed. The butterfly must destroy the caterpillar to emerge. The opera singer must break their natural speaking voice to discover the perfect tones within." He moved among his Dolatrons, adjusting their positions with the care of a director blocking a scene. "These fortunate few are merely the first. The final performance will transform dozens more, a chorus of perfection rising from Gotham's forgotten places." "The performance isn't going to happen, Valentine. Your work ends tonight." Pig tilted his head. the pig mask catching the light in a way that made it seem almost alive. "You disappoint me, Batman. I thought you of all people would understand. You who wear a mask to become something greater than human. Are we not kindred spirits? Both sculptors of a better reality? I don't force my vision on unwilling victims," Batman replied, studying the room for any sign of the missing people who might be intended for Pig's chorus. "Boss," Pudgy laughed, the sound distorted by his mask. "I offer liberation. These broken, forgotten people, discarded by Gotham just as this beautiful building was discarded when something newer, shinier caught the city's attention." His voice hardened. "When your father abandoned the old opera house to build his modern monstrosity downtown, did he consider what would happen to the art that lived here, the souls who found meaning on this stage?" Batman kept his expression neutral, despite the unexpected mention of his father. "This isn't about preserving art, it's about control. Your need to remake people according to your vision." "You're wrong," Pike said, returning to his piano. His fingers caressed the keys without pressing them, as if drawing comfort from their presence. "This is about revealing the truth beneath the flaws. Everyone wears masks, Batman. Some physically, some metaphorically. My Dollartrons simply wear theirs on the outside, honest about their transformation." He looked up suddenly. "But which is your true face? The masked vigilante or the man beneath? Which is the performance and which is real?" Before Batman could respond, the Dollartrons began to move in perfect unison, forming a circle around him. Their movements were graceful but unnatural, like ballet dancers whose joints had been re-engineered. "My chorus won't harm you," Pig assured him, returning to playing the piano. "They simply want to show you their dance, the dance of the transformed. Watch how beautiful they are in their perfection." The Dollartrons moved with disturbing synchronization, their masked faces catching the light, their bodies flowing through choreographed sequences that seemed both beautiful and wrong. Batman remained still, analyzing their movements for weaknesses, for signs of the people they had been before Pig's perfection. "Where are the others, Valentine?" Batman demanded. "The ones you've taken for your final performance?" Pig's fingers continued dancing across the piano keys, the melody becoming more complex, driving the Dollartrons to move faster, preparing, becoming. The transformation takes time if it's to be done properly. Some are still resistant to the beauty I offer. His voice took on a dreamy quality, but by tomorrow night they'll understand. And on the third night, Gotham will witness perfection, reborn on the stage that was abandoned to decay. Batman activated his cowl scanner, searching for heat signatures beyond those visible in the room. The opera house was vast, with numerous spaces where victims could be held. "Your medical license was revoked because you couldn't accept that beauty is subjective, that patients had the right to define their own perfection." Subjective? Pike's fingers crashed down on the keys, producing a discordant sound that made the Dollartrons freeze in place. Perfect proportion is mathematics, not opinion. The golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence. These are the building blocks of true beauty. He rose from the piano, moving toward Batman with surprising grace for his bulky frame. "I studied for years, mastering both the science of physical transformation and the art of aesthetic perfection. I alone understand how to unite them." As he approached, Batman noticed something in Pig's movements, a slight hesitation in his left leg, a physical imperfection at odds with his obsession with perfection. "If perfection is so attainable," Batman said carefully, "why hide your own face behind a mask?" Pygee stopped abruptly. "My appearance is irrelevant. The artist need not embody his art, he must simply create it. He turned back toward his piano. Besides, the pig is humanity's truest form, always rooting in the mud for pleasure, for sustenance, never looking up at the stars. I wear this face as a reminder of what I transcend through my work. While Pig was distracted, Batman surreptitiously placed a small tracking device on the nearest Dollartron. If he couldn't locate the other victims immediately, the tracker would allow him to find them later by following the movements of Pig's existing creations. Your final performance won't happen, Batman stated with quiet certainty. I'm shutting this down now. You're welcome to try, Pike replied, suddenly calm again. But my work is already in motion. The old passages beneath the theater district connect more than just buildings. They connect dreams, Batman. Dreams of what Gotham once was, and what it could be again. He struck a sequence of notes that seemed to serve as some kind of signal. Perhaps you should experience transformation yourself before you judge it. At this cue, the Dollartrons surged forward with unexpected speed. Batman had been prepared for an attack, but not for their coordinated precision. They moved not as individuals, but as components of a single organism, each one anticipating and complementing the other's movements. Batman evaded their initial rush, using his superior training to stay out of their grasp. But fighting the Dollartrons presented a unique challenge. They showed no reaction to pain, no self-preservation instinct. They were, as Pig had named them, like dolls, moving according to their programming regardless of the damage they sustained. They feel no pain, Pyth called out, continuing to play as he watched the confrontation. Pain is imperfection, and I have removed imperfection from their existence. Such liberty to be freed from suffering. Batman calculated his options. The approaching footsteps suggested more Dollartrons. While he could likely defeat them, doing so without causing harm to the victims inside would be challenging. More importantly, engaging them would prevent him from locating and helping the newer captives that Pig was still in the process of transforming. Batman made his decision. He threw a smoke pellet to the ground, filling the chamber with dense fog. As the Dollartrons milled in confusion, he moved swiftly toward a different tunnel than the one he'd entered through. One that, according to the old blueprints, should lead toward the Opera House's main basement. No! Pig called out, his voice echoing through the smoke. You're running from beauty, from perfection. The piano music became frantic, dissonant chords that somehow directed the Dollartrons despite the obscured visibility. Find him, bring him back to witness. Batman moved silently through the tunnel, hearing the controlled breathing of the Dollartrons as they pursued with relentless determination. The passage narrowed, then opened into what had once been a costume storage area for the opera company. Now it had been converted into another workshop, similar to the one in the abandoned costume shop, but larger, more elaborate. Here, Batman found what he'd been searching for, evidence of Pike's preparations for his final performance. Dozens of porcelain masks lined the walls, each one unique yet conforming to the same impossible standard of beauty. Surgical tables stood ready, equipped with restraints and arrays of instruments. Most disturbing was a corkboard displaying photographs of people, all apparently homeless or marginalized residents of the theater district, with notations about their potential and how they would fit into the grand chorus. Alfred, I've found his planning center, Batman reported, quickly photographing the evidence with his cowl's camera. Valentine has been targeting the homeless population around the theater district, specifically people with musical backgrounds, former musicians, singers who never made it, street performers, creating his ideal chorus from those society has forgotten, Alfred observed grimly. There's a certain horrible logic to it. On a desk in the corner, Batman found designs for the Opera House's main stage, diagrams showing how Pig planned to modify it for his grotesque performance. The plans indicated complex machinery that would transform the performers during the show itself, a public demonstration of his art that would culminate in the revelation of his masterpiece. He's planning to use the original stage machinery, Batman realized. The Opera House was famous for its innovative hydraulics that could transform the stage during performances. Valentine's repurposing it. Batman heard the approaching Dollartrons and knew his time in this location was limited. Before leaving, he spotted a journal on the desk, its pages filled with Pig's flowing, elegant handwriting. He quickly photographed several key pages, then slipped away through a maintenance shaft, just as the first Dollartrons entered the workshop. The shaft led upward, eventually opening into the Opera House's vast backstage area. As he approached the main stage, he froze at the sight before him. The grand stage of the Gotham Opera House had been partially restored, its famous machinery apparently operational again. Complex arrangements of pulleys, gears, and hydraulic systems gleamed with fresh oil. At center stage stood what appeared to be some kind of conversion apparatus, a machine designed to apply the porcelain masks and somehow fuse them to living faces. But what truly drew Batman's attention were the cages positioned in the orchestra pit, cages containing people. Unlike the Dollartrons, these individuals still had their own faces, though many showed signs of sedation. They huddled together, some whimpering quietly, others staring with vacant expressions that suggested they'd been drugged. Batman's first instinct was to free them immediately, but years of experience had taught him caution. The cages might be booby-trapped, or the victims might be too compromised to move safely without medical support. As he analyzed the situation, movement in the wings caught his attention. More Dollartrons, emerging from the shadows with their unnaturally fluid grace. "Sir, I've accessed the security feeds around the Opera House." Alfred's voice came through, broken by static. "Valentine has lookouts positioned at every entrance. Police presence would be detected immediately, potentially endangering the hostages." Batman made a rapid assessment. "I've found approximately 20 hostages in the orchestra pit. There appear to be at least 15 Dollartrons inside the building, possibly more. Valentine himself is likely still in the sub-basement at his piano. It seems to be how he coordinates the Dollartron's movements. If I may suggest, sir, secure the hostages' location, but do not attempt extraction yet. Return with proper medical support and a more comprehensive plan. These people will need specialized care." Batman reluctantly acknowledged the wisdom in Alfred's words. He would need to return to the cave, analyze the information gathered, and develop a strategy that would neutralize Pike, while ensuring the safety of both his existing victims and those he planned to transform. Before departing, Batman placed additional tracking devices near the cages and took detailed scans of the conversion apparatus on stage. Whatever Valentine had planned for his final performance, understanding his technology would be key to preventing it. As Batman made his way out through the Opera House's upper levels, he passed what had once been the Grand Lobby, a space where Gotham's elite had gathered in evening wear, their faces composed into masks of sophistication and cultural appreciation. Now dusty mirrors reflected his solitary figure moving through the decay, a different kind of mask, a different kind of performance. Pig's words echoed uncomfortably in his mind. Which is your true face, the masked vigilante or the man beneath? Which is the performance and which is real? The Batcave's cold, pristine environment provided a stark contrast to the decaying grandeur of the Opera House. As Batman removed his cowl, becoming Bruce Wayne once more, Alfred was already at work analyzing the data collected during the reconnaissance. The journal entries you photographed are most illuminating, sir, Alfred observed, enlarging portions of text on the main computer screen. Valentine, or Professor Pig as he now styles himself, appears to have developed a new polymer that bonds with human tissue. Combined with surgical alterations and some kind of neural reconfiguration, it allows him to program his victim's movements. He refers to it as choreography of the flesh. Bruce studied the technical specifications with growing concern. He's using techniques from both modern medicine and theatrical special effects. The polymer mimics the properties of theatrical masks, but perverts their purpose. Instead of being worn for a temporary performance, they become permanently fused to the wearer's identity. There is something else that might interest you, sir. Alfred brought up historical records of the opera house. The final production before the venue was closed was indeed Pygmalion, the very opera that Valentine was obsessed with. According to these reviews, it was a controversial modernization that explored themes of artificial beauty and technological enhancement. Valentine designed the masks for that production. Bruce leaned closer to the screen. So when my father redirected funding to the new Performing Arts Center, Valentine lost not just employment, but the validation of his artistic vision, Alfred finished. The timing correlates with his increasingly erratic behavior at his medical practice, the unauthorized improvements he performed on patients. He blames Wayne Enterprises for killing the art he believed in, Bruce said quietly. And now he's staging his revenge, a final performance that will transform unwilling participants into his vision of perfection. Alfred pulled up biochemical analyses of samples taken from the mask fragments. The concerning aspect is how the polymer bonds to neural tissue. It appears to create a direct connection to the brain's motor functions, allowing Valentine to control movements through musical cues. The victims remain conscious, but cannot override this external control. A puppeteer pulling strings through music, Bruce said grimly. That explains the piano's central role in his workshop. Indeed, sir. And if I may venture an observation, there's a particular cruel irony in his methods. Opera is an art form that celebrates the human voice, the expression of emotion through sound. Valentine's masks silence his victims while forcing them to perform according to his vision. They become instruments rather than artists. Bruce moved to a workbench where he had laid out components for specialized equipment. We need to develop a solvent that can break down the polymer without damaging the underlying tissue, and something to disrupt the neural links without harming the victims. I've already begun formulations based on the chemical analysis, Alfred assured him. But sir, there's something in Valentine's journal that deeply concerns me. His final performance appears to include what he calls a mass transcendence, applying his masks to all attendees, not just his chorus. Bruce's hands paused over his work. He's planning to transform the audience as well. That's why he built the machine on the main stage. It's designed for multiple simultaneous conversions. He turned to Alfred. How long until the solvent is ready? 4 hours minimum for proper synthesis and testing. Bruce checked the time, nearly dawn. Valentine's final performance was scheduled for tomorrow night, leaving them less than 48 hours to prepare. While the solvent synthesizes, I need to speak with someone who might understand Valentine's psychology better. His journal mentioned a music therapist who once treated him. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Arkham Asylum's imposing architecture as Bruce Wayne entered through the administrative wing. Dr. Eliza Kwan met him in a modest office lined with instruments, a piano in one corner, various percussion pieces arranged on shelves. all secured in ways that ensured they couldn't be used as weapons. "Mr. Wayne," she greeted him with a professional handshake, "your foundation's interest in music therapy is most welcome, though I confess, the urgency of your request was surprising." Bruce dropped the philanthropist facade quickly. "Doctor, I understand your ethical obligations, but right now, Valentine, who now calls himself Professor Pig, has abducted at least 20 people. He's surgically modifying them against their will, and plans to do the same to more." A flicker of genuine alarm crossed her features before professional composure returned. "If that's true, you should be speaking with the police, not me." "The police are involved," Bruce assured her, "but understanding Valentine's psychology might be key to resolving this without further harm to his victims." Dr. Kwan was silent for a long moment, her gaze drifting to the piano in the corner of her office. "When Laszlo first came to me, he was struggling with what he called the dissonance between inner and outer beauty. He was a gifted surgeon with genuine artistic sensibility, but increasingly unable to reconcile his personal vision of beauty with the expectations of his patients." He moved to the piano, pressing a key softly. Music became our common language. He responded to structure, to the mathematical precision of classical compositions. Bach especially. Music built on perfect patterns, on ratios and relationships that created harmony. Her finger struck a discordant note. But he couldn't tolerate improvisation, jazz, anything that prioritized expression over form. Unrefined noise, he called it. "When did his fixation on masks begin?" Bruce asked. Dr. Kwan sighed. "The masks were already a fascination when he came to me. He'd studied theatrical costume design alongside his medical training, unusual combination, but he saw them as complementary disciplines, both transforming the human form, one temporarily, one permanently." She turned back to face Bruce. "What concerned me was his growing inability to distinguish between the two. He began speaking of surgical procedures in theatrical terms, performances rather than operations." Bruce nodded, the pieces aligning with what he'd observed in Pig's workshop. "And his connection to opera specifically?" Opera represented the perfect union of art forms to him: music, visual design, narrative, all working in harmony to transform ordinary people into vessels of perfect expression. Her expression grew troubled. During our later sessions, he became fixated on Pygmalion, the myth of the sculptor whose creation was so perfect that the gods gave it life. He saw himself in that role, an artist whose vision was pure enough to transcend human limitation. "What happened when the old opera house closed?" Bruce asked. Though he already suspected the answer, it devastated him. He had been designing masks for their productions, finding a balance between his surgical work and his artistic aspirations. When the funding was redirected to the new Performing Arts Center, she hesitated. He saw it as a betrayal of true beauty in favor of commercial appeal. He specifically mentioned the Wayne Foundation's role in that decision. Dr. Kwan moved to a cabinet and removed a file, hesitating before handing Bruce a photograph. This was Laszlo before he began wearing masks consistently. The image showed a man with a severe facial asymmetry, the result of what appeared to be a congenital condition affecting the left side of his face. His features were frozen in an unnatural position, the muscles clearly compromised. Mobius syndrome, Dr. Kwan explained, a rare neurological condition that affects facial movement. In Laszlo's case, it prevented him from forming expressions on one side of his face. He couldn't smile properly, couldn't show emotion in the way others could. Bruce understood immediately, so he became obsessed with masks, perfect expressions that never change, never betray the imperfections beneath. Precisely. and his surgical career was an extension of that fixation, correcting in others what he couldn't correct in himself. She reclaimed the photograph, returning it to the file. If you're going to confront him, be aware that his pig mask isn't just a disguise, it's central to his delusion. In his mind, by wearing an obviously imperfect face, he transcends human vanity while creating perfection in others. Is there any way to break through that delusion? Bruce asked. Dr. Kwan's expression was grim. In our last sessions before he disappeared, Laszlo had begun incorporating elements of body dysmorphia with grandiose delusions. He spoke of conducting a grand performance that would transform Gotham. I recommended hospitalization, but he never returned for his next appointment. She met Bruce's gaze directly. If that delusion has fully bloomed, then logic won't reach him. The only language he might still respond to is his art. As Bruce rose to leave, Dr. Kwan added one final insight. The pig mask, it has symbolic significance beyond what I've mentioned. In many cultures, pigs represent both impurity and transformation. They consume waste and convert it to sustenance. I believe Laszlo sees himself as transforming Gotham's waste, its forgotten people, into something he considers beautiful. Night had fallen by the time Batman returned to the Opera House, now equipped with the tools needed to counter Pig's grotesque artistry. The solvent that could dissolve the porcelain masks without harming the skin beneath. A modified neural disruptor calibrated to break Valentine's control over his victims, and, most importantly, knowledge of the man behind the pig mask, his motivations, his weaknesses, the tragedy that had twisted his perception of beauty and perfection. The theater district was unnaturally quiet, even for Gotham standards. Batman observed from the rooftops as people hurried past the old opera house, eyes averted, pace quickening, as if on some instinctive level they sensed the horror unfolding within its walls. Alfred, what's the status on Gordon's forces? Standing by 3 blocks away, sir, ready to move on your signal. Medical units are prepared for the victims, with specialized trauma teams for those already altered. Batman made his approach through a different route this time, through the old fly system above the stage, where scenery would once have been raised and lowered during performances. From this vantage point, he could see the final preparations for Valentine's performance in terrible detail. The stage had been transformed into an elaborate operating theater. The conversion apparatus gleamed under spotlights, now clearly revealed as a fusion of surgical equipment and theatrical machinery. Seats in the auditorium had been restored, not with comfort in mind, but with concealed restraints that could trap an audience. Most disturbing were the rows of porcelain masks hanging from the flies like ghostly faces, waiting to descend onto their victims. In the orchestra pit, the cages containing Valentine's intended chorus remained, but now the captives were being prepared, bathed, dressed in formal attire that mimicked performers from the opera house's golden age. Some struggled weakly, others seemed resigned to their fate. Dolatrons moved among them with inhuman grace, attending to their needs with the detached care of backstage hands preparing actors for their debut. And at center stage stood Professor Pig himself, resplendent in a grotesque parody of a conductor's formal wear. His pig mask had been embellished with theatrical elements. Gold leaf around the eyes, a crown of laurel leaves suggesting classical artistic authority. He moved with the exaggerated gestures of an opera director, inspecting every detail of his macabre production. Tomorrow night, he declared to his silent Dolatrons, the city that abandoned beauty will witness its rebirth. Those who come seeking mere entertainment will become part of true art, permanent, perfect, beyond decay or disappointment. He caressed the conversion apparatus lovingly, and those who once closed these doors, who redirected funds to soulless modernism, They will be specially invited to witness transformation firsthand. Batman prepared to descend when something unexpected caught his attention. A figure entering from the wings who wasn't a Dollatron. This person moved with natural human awkwardness, shoulders hunched, steps uncertain. As they moved into the light, Batman recognized Dr. Eliza Kwan. "Laszlo," she called, her voice steady despite the obvious tension in her posture. "I received your invitation." Pig whirled, the pig mask tilting in apparent surprise. "Doctor, you came, how appropriate, the physician who failed to understand my vision, here to witness its culmination." Despite the mocking words, there was genuine emotion in his voice, a hint of the human still existing beneath the monstrous persona. "I understand your vision better than you think, Laszlo," Dr. Kwan replied, remaining at a cautious distance. "I understand that pain drives it, the pain of living in a world that values appearance over substance, that judges before understanding. Pretty words, Doctor. Psychology's mask for uncomfortable truths." Pig gestured grandly toward his Dollatrons. "I've moved beyond words to action, beyond temporary comfort to permanent solution." Dr. Kwan took a step closer. "Have you? Or have you simply found a new way to hide? Your masks don't reveal truth, Laszlo. They conceal it. True beauty includes imperfection, includes pain. It's human." Batman watched the exchange with growing tension, prepared to intervene the moment Valentine showed signs of violence. But something interesting was happening. Pike's theatrical movements had become less pronounced, his posture subtly shifting toward the man he had been before donning the mask. "You still don't understand," Valentine said, but his voice had lost some of its bombastic quality. "I'm creating what was denied me, perfect expression, faces that convey exactly what they mean, without the betrayal of flawed musculature." "Because of your Mobius syndrome," Dr. Kwan acknowledged gently, "because your face couldn't show what you felt. But Laszlo, forcing your pain onto others doesn't heal it. It multiplies it. These people aren't being perfected. They're being silenced, just as you felt silenced." Valentine's hands rose to touch his pig mask, fingers tracing its contours. "The silence is peaceful. When the face is fixed, unchanging, there's no need to constantly wonder how you appear to others, whether they can see the truth or only the flawed vessel." Batman recognized the moment of vulnerability and acted. He dropped silently to the stage behind Valentine, solvent dispenser ready. But before he could move, Valentine sensed his presence and spun around. "You," he snarled, rage returning to his voice. "Always interfering, always judging." He struck a sequence of notes on a small device at his wrist, and immediately his Dollatrons responded, moving to surround Batman with their unnatural coordination. "Bit Laszlo. Don't," Kwan called out. "This isn't art, it's destruction." "Sometimes they're the same thing," Valentine retorted, backing toward his conversion apparatus. "My chorus, protect your conductor. The performance must proceed as planned." Batman deployed the solvent in a wide arc as the Dollatrons closed in. Where the mist touched their porcelain masks, the material began to soften, crack, separate from the skin beneath. Some of the Dollatrons faltered, hands rising to their dissolving masks in confusion. Others continued their advance, Valentine's control still maintaining its hold despite the physical degradation. "No!" Valentine cried, genuine anguish in his voice. "My perfect creations, my flawless chorus." Batman engaged the remaining functional Dolatrons, careful to use only enough force to incapacitate without harming. Each one he disabled received a targeted dose of the neural disruptor, breaking Valentine's control over their movements. As they collapsed, human groans and sobs replaced the eerie silence of their performance, pain returning along with autonomy. Valentine watched his carefully orchestrated production fall apart around him, his grand vision dissolving as surely as the masks he had crafted. Something seemed to break within him, the theatrical persona cracking to reveal the wounded human beneath. "It was supposed to be beautiful," he said, voice suddenly small, almost childlike in its disappointment. "A perfect performance that would never end, never decay like everything else." His hand moved toward a control panel on the conversion apparatus. If beauty cannot endure, then perhaps its opposite should reign instead. Batman realized Valentine was activating some kind of failsafe, likely rigged to harm the remaining captives or destroy the opera house itself. He launched himself across the stage, tackling Valentine away from the controls just as his fingers brushed against them. They crashed together against the ornate proscenium arch, Valentine's pig mask partially dislodged by the impact. Through the gap, Batman could see the human eye beneath, wide with fear and anguish, tears streaming down the immobile side of Valentine's face that could not express the emotion he clearly felt. "It's over, Valentine," Batman said, maintaining his hold but careful not to cause unnecessary pain. "Your performance is cancelled." "It's never over," Valentine replied, the grandiose Professor Pig persona slipping further. "The need for beauty never ends. The search for perfection, the horror of falling short. It's eternal." His voice cracked. "You wear a mask too, Batman. You understand what it means to become something other than your flawed self." "My mask is a choice," Batman replied, "not a prison, and not something I force onto others." Valentine went suddenly still, the fight draining from him. "Choice, yes. Perhaps that's the difference, perhaps." His voice trailed off as police sirens became audible in the distance, Gordon's forces moving in as planned. As Batman secured Valentine for transfer to Arkham, Dr. Kwan moved among the freed Dolatrons and captives, offering what comfort she could until medical teams arrived. She approached Batman as officers led Valentine away, the surgeon now silent, his pig mask clutched in his handcuffed hands like a child's security blanket. "We'll need extensive treatment," she said quietly. "His delusions are deeply entrenched, intertwined with genuine artistic talent and medical knowledge that became horribly misdirected." "Will he recover?" Batman asked. Dr. Kwan watched as Valentine was placed in a police transport, her expression thoughtful. "Recovery means different things for different conditions. Will he ever see beauty without obsession? Possibly not. But perhaps he can learn to channel his vision in ways that don't harm others." She looked up at Batman with professional curiosity. "You know, his fixation on your mask wasn't entirely delusional. You both use them to transform, to become something beyond ordinary human limitation. The difference is consent," Batman replied. "Choice." "Yes," she agreed. "Though I wonder, how much of a choice did either of you truly have? Trauma shapes us all, Batman. The masks we wear in response are sometimes the only way we know to survive." As dawn broke over the theater district, Batman watched from a distance as medical teams continued treating Valentine's victims. The porcelain masks had been removed, revealing faces beneath, bruised, altered in some cases, but undeniably human, with all the imperfections and expressions that entailed. Some were crying, Others looked around in confusion. A few were beginning tentative conversations with their rescuers. Not perfect, not identical, not performing according to someone else's score, but authentic in their humanity. Later, as Bruce Wayne stood in the Batcave, cowl removed, Alfred attended to minor injuries sustained during the confrontation. A disturbing case, sir, even by Gotham's considerable standards, Alfred observed, applying antiseptic to a cut along Bruce's temple. To think that Valentine's descent began with the Opera House closure, a Wayne Enterprises decision, is not the cause, Alfred, Bruce corrected gently. A trigger, perhaps. Valentine's issues went much deeper. His inability to accept imperfection, his rage at a condition he couldn't control. One might observe certain parallels, Alfred suggested carefully, glancing meaningfully at the batsuit now standing empty on its display. The need to transform trauma into something meaningful, to wear a face that can express what one truly feels. Bruce considered this as he watched footage from the Opera House cleanup on the Bat computer. Restoration teams were carefully documenting Valentine's workshop before dismantling it, preserving evidence while ensuring the technologies couldn't be replicated. Valentine's tragedy wasn't his mask, Alfred. It was forcing others to wear his vision of perfection. Bruce touched his own face reflectively. Batman isn't about escaping who I am. It's about honoring it, channeling pain toward protection rather than control. Alfred smiled slightly. Very eloquently put, sir. Though I'd suggest the true difference lies not in philosophy, but in compassion. Valentine saw others as materials for his art. You see them as worth protecting, imperfections and all. As night fell again over Gotham, Batman resumed his patrol, one mask among many in a city of hidden faces and complex identities. Valentine's words echoed in his mind. Which is your true face? The masked vigilante or the man beneath? Perhaps the question itself was flawed. Bruce Wayne and Batman weren't separate identities, but interwoven aspects of the same being. Each authentic in its way, each necessary, each revealing different facets of the same truth. The mask didn't hide, it focused, channeled, protected. Not a perfect solution, but a human one. The moon rose slowly over the city, bathing its architecture in silver light that softened harsh edges and granted a temporary grace to even its most neglected corners. From his vantage point atop Wayne Tower, Batman could see the theater district in the distance, its faded marquees and crumbling grandeur now scheduled for restoration. The Wayne Foundation had announced funding to revitalize the area, not as competition for the new arts center, but as a complement, preserving the district's historic character while creating opportunities for artists who might otherwise be forgotten. It wouldn't erase the damage Valentine had done, nor heal his victims overnight, but it acknowledged a truth the surgeon-turned-monster had distorted. Beauty wasn't about perfection, but about authenticity. About honoring both history and potential, scars and strength, the masks we choose and the faces beneath. With that quiet certainty, Batman launched himself into the darkness, his silhouette briefly visible against the moon before melting into the shadows. A protector who understood that sometimes the greatest strength came not from denying one's brokenness, but from embracing it. And so our tale of Gotham comes to an end. Let the gentle night embrace you as you drift toward peaceful dreams, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, the Dark Knight watches over his city. If you're not asleep yet, we will now play the ambience of Gotham City at night to help you fall asleep. And if you were just listening to our tales, we will see you next time. Good night, and sleep well.